cookies. My grandma Pope's recipe. I've gone through 2 complete bottles of molasses on this last taping. I taped one more time, but I erased it again, so this makes the second time on the last one. I broke into the black strap, but still quite a bit left, so I'm going to have to make some more cookies. Okay, and also maybe some more of the this is a good song to play tonight to open the last chapter of the Molasses Flood, the Great Molasses Flood in 1919 in Boston, Massachusetts. After You're Gone by Marion Harris, the #1 song in the United States in 1919 in January. Pretty appropriate for opening of this last, we hope last, if it loads right, of this last installment. If you've been with me, I really appreciate it. These were not supposed to be this long, but when I get all involved in history, I love it so much that it just keeps going and going and going.
Hi, this is Pink, and I've got a bedtime secret that will make you think.
Yeah, we don't want a bedtime secret tonight.
Once upon a calm kids in a land chock full of snooze, sleep stories help get your nights back with calm.
It's an ad for Calm Sleep, which we all can. Oh my gosh, there's Donald Trump. Well, we don't need him.
But we may not.
There we go. We don't care about him. So I thank everybody for being with me. I hope you learned a lot about the great Boston flood, which hardly anyone knew about. So thank you to Stephen Polio and to me and to my other fans who have actually looked stuff up. Thank you. Probably the last installment you watched for was the hardest to hear because it goes through the deaths and everything that occurred. So we're going to finish up today, and hopefully it won't be over about 40 minutes long because my dinner's in the oven and it's 8:30 at night and I'm hungry. I'm going to back up just a little bit. By February 1919, now remember, let's go over again. It happened in January, on the 15th of January in 1919. And the good one saving grace that we talked about the last program we did was that it happened in January. Because had it not happened in January, the kids would have been out of school, in the park. The flies would have been horrible. The rats would have been overrunning the place. Not just a problem, but overrunning the place. And a few more people in January. So I guess that the one thing happened that was good, it was that it was in January instead of July or June or August. So then I want to remind you too, and I think we've already covered this, that in February of that year, go over a month after the whatever happened, the molasses tank came down, a grand jury was convened, and in a brief statement, the company said the tank had been blown up. and they bore no responsibility. People said that yes, they did, and the grand jury came out and said that they believe it was intentionally. Well, I don't know what they believe. They believe that the company had liability for it. The United States Industrial Alcohol had liability. People in Boston had liability for not checking on the building codes. But as far as the oh God, what do you call it? The murder thing about when you don't really mean to murder somebody. When they do, what is that called? Anyway, they said that there is just not enough evidence to charge the United States Industrial Alcohol with manslaughter, with involuntary manslaughter. My brain just went. And so that's how the court case ended, with no finding of guilt. I did want to just mention right now, in that same year, August of 1919, the United States Industrial Alcohol reported to authorities in mid-August that 2 of their ships had been going down. Actually, 2 of its molasses things had been en route, not going down, but coming up from the Caribbean full of molasses, and they just disappeared. 2 of them. And there was never any word of any of them. And of course, the United States Industrial Alcohol said that it was, of course, anarchists that had destroyed those, but there was never really any proof of that to come. September of 1919 was the darkest month of all that year, 1919, and that's because 8 months it had been since the disaster, and the country, especially Boston, but everybody was in bad shape. Heat record that year, humidity record that year, tensions high in the general public. Anarchist leaders being deported back to Italy, which I guess in one case is good, but for the other Italians here that think they've been, pardon my language, screwed, it was not good, because it just got them more crazy. We just had started out in 1919, all kinds of strikes. The Boston Police Department struck. The rioting happened just like kind of it does today when people strike. The U.S. Steel workers struck. They didn't like the 12-hour work week. They thought the conditions were dangerous in the mill. They rioted. They threw bricks and rocks at the state police. One striker was killed. It just went on and on and on and on in September and October of 1919. And again, it wasn't just Boston. It was the whole eastern coast of the United States in New England. President Woodrow Wilson had a massive stroke, never did recover. That got the country all crazy, and then Warren G. Harding was elected in the 1920 election, and that didn't help a lot either if you all study history a little bit. December of 1919, I like the way I do that. I noticed not 3 times on the ceiling if you want me twice on the pipe. This is supposed to be serious though, so I'll get back to serious. I'm now serious. So anyway, in December, the USIA, which is the United States Industrial Alcohol, if you haven't gotten that by now, shut down its manufacturing facility in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Nearly 4 years after the tank was built, 11 months after the Molasses catastrophe happened, and they fired almost all the 125 people that worked for them. Now, Arthur P. Gell, who is the antagonist of this story, he was transferred to New York City. At that same time, on December 1st, Stephen Claggerty, who was the mentally ill, I don't like retarded, that's what they call it, the mentally ill brother of Martin, died in the Boston State Hospital for the Insane. And it said finally surrendered to the demons that had tortured him since the rescuers. The rescuers were cute skaters. Anyway, they rescued him from that molasses. Be serious, Susan. And many people blamed the molasses on his whole stress level he had the rest of his life and dying in the mental institution. And he was the 21st and the final death that was actually attributed to the Boston. That's Boston molasses. Boston. Lost my Boston in Boston. Anyway, that was the last death attributed to it. In December, the boat pulled away from the harbor. It had gobs and gobs of what do you call them? Deportees, being deported back to Russia. J. Edgar Hoover, who was a special assistant to the Attorney General, watched the ship pull away. The year had been awful economically. The molasses flood, the labor unions, the anarchist attacks, the hatred towards the Bolsheviks, agitators, foreigners, because many people, isn't that like today? Many people blame foreigners for all the agitation and mayhem that was going on in this country. And the U.S. industrial alcohol would rely on those two things, fear and hatred. They would rely on that to make their case and blame what happened at the molasses tank on a bomb and anarchy. And in the meantime, they have escaped complete responsibility for what happened to the grand jury. The victims, the grand jury said that we cannot indict any of these people or this company on manslaughter. It just can't be done. The end. So then the families, of course, and their victims and families wanted justice, which leads us to this chapter today called David and Goliath. And I have to go shut the little timer off in the oven that tells me my stove was frozen macaroni and cheese is done. Because that's what I have about every other night. Hang on, I'm coming. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I'll be back over here in a minute. Let's turn this oven back on. And turn on the temperature down. Okay, I am back. Boop! I'm back. Okay, so let's start part 3 and finish this thing up. I need about a cookie, but it'd take 2 minutes for me to chew it since I have no teeth. But anyway, Ogden. I want to hope you remember Osgood has come back from the war. Been in private practice, but still doing a lot of pro bono work and wanting to do something to better the world. So, Superior Court Judge Hitchcock asked him to be an auditor in a civil case between the victims and their families and the United States Industrial Alcohol. He was not, sorry, that button was buzzing again. He was not a judge, but he was an accomplished lawyer. Now, I guess that you can call that an auditor, and they can preside over the case and make the decision on the case. Back then you could, maybe it's that way today. So Judge Hiscock asked if he could do that and told him it would be about a 6-week commitment. Mr. Ogden, lawyer Ogden, had always wanted to do that, so he took that challenge and became the judge in the case where he would decide at the end of the civil suit damages if there was any. He did not think 6 weeks would be a big sacrifice at all. So the United States Steel Industrial Business Group decided that they can't have 125 different attorneys arguing a case. They asked Ogden to incorporate the cases and condense it, where you have one main lead lawyer for one side, one main lead lawyer for the other. And so that's what they decided to do, because Ogden couldn't see 125 attorneys in the courtroom, and all the stenographers, and all the press people, and all the different lawyers involved, and just didn't think it would work. So he allowed that. And so each side, the 125 civil cases were merged, and the lawyer that was put in charge of that was Damian Hall. Okay. Now for the defense, which would have been the United States alcohol industry, the United States Industrial Alcohol, excuse me, that was the name of the company. They chose a man who, I had to look up his name, Charles Francis, and his last name has to be crazy. It's pronounced Clote, but it's spelled C-L-O-A-T-E, but it's Clote. Mr. Clote for the alcohol industry, and Mr. Hall for the plaintiffs, which would be the victims and the families of the people that lost people. Both of them were wealthy men. Both of them were lawyers. Ogden, well, it doesn't matter who Ogden liked. That's unnecessary information when we're trying to get this done, so it doesn't matter. They were both very good in court. They both held the courtroom spellbound. Ogden was, Ogden, good Lord. Never mind. Hall was a little bit lower in stature, shorter in stature, but he had complete command of the courtroom. So that's what happened there. And then another guy you need to know is named Dudley Dorr, D-O-R-R, Dorr. He was the owner of a couple of buildings on Commercial Street that got, boom, destroyed. And I don't know how, but he became the trustee of the case that the plaintiffs brought. And I guess if you could become a trustee of the case the plaintiffs brought, then you get the case named after you. So all you people that want to go straight to the law books and look this up, you need to look up the Great Molasses Flood. You would look up, it's officially cataloged as Dorr, D-O-R-R, versus United States Industrial Alcohol. Dorr versus United States Industrial Alcohol. That's how you find it categorized. August 10th to September 8th, we had opening statements. Opening statements came first by the plaintiffs, which was Hall. He spent the entire day on August 11th and also August 12th. And he, not one time in his opening statements did he mention the possibility of the United States Industrial Alcohol being responsible for that. He just didn't do it. Instead, he concentrated on either two or three things. The first thing he concentrated on is he knew that Ogden had served in France. So he said to Ogden, take the horror that you saw in France, a picture of it, cover it with dead horses or horses struggling and dead men, and cover it with molasses, and you're going to see what happened on Commercial Street in Boston in January 1919. So he put a visual effect, because remember, Ogden's going to be the one deciding this. There's no jury. And he gave a great description of what it probably looked like. He actually said, my opening statement is not to put blame on anyone, or negligence, or whatever you call it. But he wanted to describe what happened. He wanted to stick to the facts and describe what happened. He continued to tell the court the size of the steel container, the height of the reservoir, that the reservoir was 50 feet high. 50 feet high. But he knew that wouldn't really make a difference it just wouldn't register with the people. So instead, he did some little things that would make people realize what that is. Okay? The height of the tank from the foundation of the tank to the top of its roof was fully twice the size of the courtroom that they were standing in. The diameter of the reservoir that held the molasses was 90 feet. A diameter equal to about twice the size of this courtroom. He described the weight of the molasses in the tank. I'm going slow so this will sink into the seep cells in your brain. 2.3 million gallons of molasses. And it's impossible to really realize what that is. So he went on and he used an illustration to show that the weight of molasses in the reservoir at the time that the tank exploded was equivalent I'm sorry, it wasn't equivalent. It weighed 2,300,000, over 26 million pounds. 13,000 tons. So to give an example, he took one of the big steam engines that they used back at that time. It's called a mogul engine, M-O-G-U-L. And he said that it would take one of those engines weighs about 100 tons. So to get the weight of what this reservoir molasses would hold would be equivalent to 130 ton locomotive engines. 130 of the locomotive engines, which each weighed a ton. And if you weren't quite sure of what that sounded like, then he used another representation, which he said it would also be equal to 13,000 new Ford automobiles, which weigh about a ton each. Then the second thing he did, the first thing he did was he asked the judge to visualize what that would look like, because he knew the judge had been into France. Second thing, he gave descriptions of the weight and the height and the size that people would understand. And the third thing he did is he took some of the victims, like I've done for you all, and described the suffering they had. Maria Devastation, the young girl that was being lectured by the people to go away and not collect wood, and what happened to her. Bridget Claggerty, who was the mother, I believe, yes, the mother who ended up dying of Martin and Stephen, and then I forget the sister's name. The little 10-year-old kid, which broke your heart, Pasquale in Tosco. And then the one that broke my heart the second most was George Leahy, who was the guy that lay in there, and all he could move was his neck, and he did everything he could to keep his neck finally it just went down in the molasses. He couldn't do it. Everything else was pinned. So he went through that. At one time, it was kind of interesting. He said the molasses swept through the North End playground, a place that was frequented in the summer by thousands upon thousands of dwellers of the North End, men, women, and children, particularly of the women and children who went to the playground to escape the heat of the day. And Charles Clote interrupted and said, "Object, this accident occurred in the middle of winter." To which Hall snapped back perfectly, "That is true. But you kept your tank there in July, as well as in January. And the children of the city were coasting and ice skating in January at the North End playground." And then the next thing he did, I lost count whether it was 3 or 4, but the next thing he did, he asked Ogden to please go tour the site and look at it. Get how it's laid out. Get to how the land's laid out. Learn that so you can understand what happened. He finished his opening statement without mentioning a cause of blame in any way, but his colorful choice of word and his passion of language and his graphic descriptions left no doubt in that courtroom who was responsible for this accident. He didn't have to say it. Then the lead attorney for the United States Steel, Industrial Steel, he didn't have to start his opening remarks for a couple weeks because Hall had some preliminary witnesses that described the devastation when it let loose. So it was a little while before he was able. When he did open, he certainly did mention their thought that a bomb was placed in the tank, and that's what made it blow up, and it was placed there by an anarchist because that's just what they were doing during that day. By the time the trial came up, there was a lot of anarchy, bombs, and attacks and riots being, I need to look right, you don't I? Being done in Boston. So he used that. He did provide a window in what the heart of the defense was going to say, and that is it was all done at the United States Industrial Steel. It was nothing on their part. He argued that Molasses disaster was not due to any structural defects. It was due completely to a bomb being carried up the steps to the top and being dropped down into the tank and exploding and bringing the tank down. That's exactly what he said. He said he had an eyewitness who could testify to seeing that happen. One eyewitness. He reminded the court that there had been fences put up and posters up about the anarchist activity in the area. He said it would be very easy. There was a flight of steps that led to the top of the tank to permit the gaugers of the U.S. Customs to make their measurements, and anybody could go up and drop a bomb down. He said he was going to offer witnesses that were experts in all kinds of different fields. I can't say the one word. It's people that study the reactions of metal. I can't say what they are. Some metallurgist. And he said a lot of the damage around the tank, it wasn't caused by the alcohol that flowed out or weeped and seeped. Remember, when you weep, you seep, or when you seep, you weep. It wasn't caused by that. It was caused by dynamite. And he tried to get an expert to, this kind of sounds like you're doing a murder trial where you look at the blood splatter. He wanted to look at the molasses splatter to prove his case. So the courtroom battle was set. The battle lines were drawn. And ding, let me see who's calling me. Linda, who's a friend of mine, Casey's. So, are you at home yet? And how did your afternoon go? And I'll have to answer after I get done because we're doing a video right now. That gave me a minute to figure out where I am. Oh, I know what happened. In September of 1920, actually it was September 16th, a bomb exploded in New York. And in that explosion in New York, it was on Wall Street. And it was at that time the most deadly anarchist attack in America. It killed almost 40, not almost, almost killed you, but it killed approximately about 40 innocent people. It happened in the middle of the day. It happened while he had just a few days before given his opening argument. And it reminded people that this is still a way of life for these anarchists to set bombs off and do damage here. And the book says, I'm going to read just a couple lines, but in the places none of us like to visit, the darkest corners of the mind, the coldest reaches of the heart, Charles F. Clote must have felt a sense of perverse satisfaction when he received word on the afternoon of September 16th that someone, most likely an anarchist, had detonated a deadly bomb on Wall Street in New York City. As awful as the noontime explosion had been, killing nearly 40 innocent people, the tragic event instantly enhanced the credibility of the opening argument that Clote had delivered just days before. It affirmed his circumstantial thesis. It offered a timely and deadly reminder that violence was still a way of life for anarchists. And even though the Ogden or Clote never actually mentioned bombing in a courtroom, it was like the elephant in the room. It was there. And everyone knew about it. So it worked in his favor. I even had a note left by the anarchists. That says after Wall Street bombing, some threatening letters went out to people. So I'm just trying to give you the atmosphere in Boston at the time. Not good. Not good. If anything, leaning a little bit in the defense. The biggest number one question in the civil case was if anarchists could explode a bomb at high noon in the heart of New York's financial district in September of 1920, couldn't they not have done the same thing in the north end of Boston on January 15th, 1919? Would that have been so in the heart of Boston's commercial waterfront district? More than anything else, the outcome of the Molasses case depended upon this question. So, and let me get my bearings right here. Since this is the second time that I taped this, I'm hoping it'll be a little shorter this time. Clote got to go first, and he brought up expert witnesses that testified that this was very likely the work of a bomb. He was lucky enough somehow to get the expert from the state police in Massachusetts to testify for him about explosives and how this was most likely caused by an explosive. And that was great because it went great for Clote, but when Mr. Hogg got up, he just filleted him with the questioning, which the other day I read the questioning out, but in the search for time. I don't think I'm going to do that today. But he did say, after I said I'm not going to do it, this is Hall. Did you see any evidence in any parts of the tank wall that were collected from which you could make up your mind that the dynamite or any other high explosives had caused the failure? And Wedger had to say, no, sir, did not. And then there was a lot more testimony here. There you go. Buy this book. You can read because it's all pretty interesting. So by the time the examination done, the cross-examination, he had gotten Wedger, who worked with the state police of Massachusetts, to admit 2 critical points. That, number one, the state police had discovered no broken glass at the site that would go with a bomb explosion. It would go more with molasses tearing the windows out. Second, the cold molasses. I forgot to do this in the first one, so you're getting extra. The cold molasses most likely blocked or trapped the carbon dioxide gas fermenting below between the warm and cold layers of molasses. And that gas would certainly exert pressure, and it wouldn't exert pressures at the top of the tank. You scientists will understand this. It's going to be at the sides of the tank. So extreme pressure was being exerted at the side of the tank because the pipe that brought the molasses into the tank was at the bottom of the tank. So you're putting warm molasses in the bottom when the top of the tank is cold. He was also asked about, but you formed or expressed it for the first time this morning, this opinion that you have, and Wedger says it's the first time I've been asked for an opinion. And Hall says, and the first time you have ever formed the opinion. And Wedger says, well, I couldn't form one until he, I can't say this out laughing. I couldn't form one until he told me what to form it on. And Hall said, I see. Well then, your answer, sir, is based upon Klotz, his hypothesis only. And Wedger answered, why, absolutely so. Then came the eyewitness. The eyewitness for the defense was a woman named Winifred McNamara, who lived across the street from where the tank came down. And the day it happened, she was out hanging laundry on the line, and she noticed smoke coming up from where the tank was. She watched the smoke billow up. And when on cross-examination, that Hall tried to ask her, what kind of pipe did you see? What kind of smoke did you see? How do you know the smoke wasn't from something else on the wharf? She got all mad or PO'd and got up and left the stand and threatened the court and said, no, sir, I couldn't tell you. I didn't see the pipe. I saw the smoke. I couldn't tell you what was on the top of the tank, sir. And she said, she got up and threatened to leave, and the judge told her to sit back down. And she did, and she continued, but she was what you might call hostile witness. So, you take the inconsistency in this Wedger's testimony, you put in this Ms. McNamara with her lovely attitude, getting up and trying to leave the stand up 10 times and saying that she's going to get him if they keep asking her these questions. And his case is not going too absolutely well. And then comes a thing that changes everything. Arthur P. Gell, Jell, the antagonist of this story. Arthur P. Gell had gone to Boston and become the vice president of the U.S. Industrial Alcohol. And he did not want to travel from New York to Massachusetts. It was going to be a hardship on him. So Ogden agreed with him and sent both lawyers and their people to New York to visit and take testimony from Mr. Gell. The USIA lawyers thought it'd be a good idea to have them meet Mr. Gell at a big fancy hotel in New York City because he thought that that would coagulate, what is that word used for blood, whatever it is, with Ogden and his personal life in living that part of society. He was deadly wrong. So anyway, they met at a big fancy hotel. And they did questioning. And again, when it came Hall's time, he absolutely filleted him with the sharpest knife you've ever seen into testimony that made him look like an absolute idiot. This is, I'm sorry, keep going here. I do this every time. I skip through some testimony that happened at the courtroom before they went to New York, but it's not near as important as this, so I'm just going to skip right through here and get to that New York testimony. So when Hall got to him, he immediately said, you know, you've been doing this how many years, and all you've ever done is been you've been a financial administrator, right? You didn't know anything about safety of construction or anything else for this tank. What he did is he ordered, and when I say he, Gell, ordered the Hammond Steel Works to construct steel plates for this tank that were at fear of safety of 3. Gell had no idea what the hell that meant, but he thought, oh, that's good. So, this is Hall. Was it the factor of safety of 3 that you determine the result of any investigation or advice from the technically trained engineers, builders, or architects? No. No? No. Did you, prior to making a recommendation of a factor of the safety of 3, make any investigation, whatever, as to the factor of safety which the ordinary engineering practice called for? Joe. No. Did you consult anyone before making the suggestion as to the factor of the safety of 3? I don't remember having done so. Is it fair to say then that you arrived at that in your own mind? Joe, not entirely. I have been told in the past by tank manufacturers that they built tanks with a factor of safety of 2. So I figured 3 would be sufficient. Hall, do you know what manufacturers told you that? Joe, I do not. Or the size of the tanks to which they were referred to, which they referred? I do not. When Mr. Shellhammer of Hammond Ironworks showed you the plans in January of 1915, did you have any talk with him about the factor of safety in the specifications? Joe, I cannot remember.
Yeah, 3 months and a day. From the time
do you remember that you did? No, I do not.
So we've seen many times before this doesn't always go.
With such experience as you have, were you able, by looking at the plans and specifications, to determine from them what factor of safety had been provided to him? Joe, no. I'm going to turn that TV off in just a minute. Did you submit the plans or specifications to any architect or engineer? Joe, no. Did you submit them to the New York office of the U.S. Industrial Alcohol? Did you show them to any officer of USIA? Joe, no. Did anyone ask to see them, to inspect them? Joe, no. I want to ask you one more time before I go on with the next line of inquiry. Whether any factor of safety as determined upon the result of any investigation or advice from technically trained engineers, builders, or architects.
Witnesses who have to come up, so they'll have to decide how this will end
No.
I believe.
Your answer is no? Jill, no. And then he attacked him, and I won't go on about the width of the steel plates, what they were supposed to be. He never checked. They agreed upon a certain width. All the plates of steel that they received were not the strength of the width that they ordered. And he questioned him, and we won't go through that, but because I don't have time, because I'm afraid you'll leave me. So they did this in the hotel. The Hotel Belmont in New York City on March the 25th of 1921. And he was basically just, again, I love the word ballet because that's what he was.
Thank you very much.
So they,
We have another round of subpoenas, as I mentioned.
now remember,
Partisan committee investigating.
I'm going to talk while I go shut that TV off so we don't have that. Remember, in this civil case, there is a jury, unlike in the first case. So, the jury listened to all this testimony that came back, and just before 8 o'clock on Thursday.
Conspiracy theory flirted with Holocaust denial using an absolutely grotesque analogy involving cookies and Cookie Monster, really disgusting stuff. Fuentes was a very common presence at Stop Steal rallies. He was present at the Capitol on January 6th.
Don't worry, I'm still over here with you.
But on January 6th, 2021, you brought people, your followers outside the Capitol.
There we go. Coming back. Can't have that because I'm just about done. Can't have him interrupting my case. And I'm sorry if you're bored with this, but I find court cases absolutely amazing. Casey loved to read true crime, and so did I, but I like one nice, easy murder that was done by emotion, and she liked serial killers, but she never liked to read about the court cases, and I did. So, okay, so the jury told the judge in July 14th, 1921. Now remember, this whole entire mess started in 1915. This is when the tank was first built, and it was rushed all through to get done by the time they got that shipment of molasses from the West Indies. And now we're in 1921. It's a lot of years. In the meantime, there's been 2 anarchists that have been sentenced, and not only have they been sentenced, they've been sentenced to death. And of course, the people in the northern end have a different view of these anarchists, and they didn't like that. And so the hearings came to a conclusion. Ogden said, Ogden was the one that was actually going to award the damages. It wasn't the jury's. The jury was that, you're responsible for this, or whoever's held culpable for this. They brought up before they quit all the people that we've talked about to testify and tell how horrible it was. Then in July 1923, Ogden began a little vacation in France because they were honoring him before he came back and gave a verdict. I haven't left you. Talking about closing arguments here. The plaintiffs totally depended upon the anarchy defense. And also, something was, but that's the defense. The plaintiffs spent their time solely on the structural defects of the tank from the very start. with everything from steel construction being, the steel was too thin, to rivets popping out, to molasses seeping all the time, to when the tank was built not having the holes matched up and they did a slide thing, SRAM, that's rammed and shoved, SRAM, something through, and then they pulled it out and lined them up and got the rivets in. So they were totally dependent on that. So finally, on Saturday, September 29th of 1923, the court case ended. Ogden took something like a 2-week vacation to Paris because he'd been doing this now 10 months. And remember, 6 weeks is what they told him it would take. We had a president change in here. And 8 weeks after the inauguration of the president, which was April 28, 1925, Ogden issued his verdict. And his verdict was that the United States Industrial Alcohol, one of the nation's largest industrial corporations, was liable for the collapse of the molasses tank on the Boston waterfront. He had a 51-page report submitted to the Superior Court of Massachusetts. He rejected the claims of sabotage, and he said the only thing left to conclude from all the evidence is that the tank collapsed due to structural weakness. So it was also his responsibility to award damages, which he did for every one of the 125 people that did the case. And in those, of course, you have to think of the money at this time, back in 1923. Those that were killed, their estates got $6,000. The city of Boston got $25,000 for the buildings in the North End paving yard. The elevated railway, Boston Elevated Railroad, they got $42,000, which today doesn't sound like a whole lot, but back then I think probably was. Families of people that were killed received basically $6,000. Sometimes they got $2,000 to $3,000 more, depending on what happened. Like the kid with the fractured skull. Then some people got an extra $1,000 for pain and suffering. But all the individual settlements were somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000, which today doesn't seem like a whole lot. I don't think. He did say that the young man that died in the insane asylum did not qualify for any settlements from the process. So in the process, 119 plaintiffs received, and then he said, let me back up just for a minute, that, if anybody disagrees with my figures, then you have a higher place to go if you need to, which is a higher court, which all families did, and appealed it. And by the end of that process, it said 119 plaintiffs have received a double victory. They doubled the amount of money that everybody was awarded. And the USIA, quickly came to an agreement that they wouldn't fight that when it went on, because they knew it would just be bad. So they just agreed to double everything and call it a day. So that was decided, and shortly after that, the end of August of 1927, the two anarchists that got a death sentence were actually executed and put to death. And when that happened, remember, most of the North End are Italiano, and they gathered at the playground adjacent to where the molasses tank stood and took part in a 8-mile funeral procession to the cemetery. And then after they were cremated, with just a few isolated exceptions, the anarchist movement died with the Molasses case, because this was putting these two to death. They were the two main ones, and it's kind of the end of an era. Epilogue, which you got to remember, is in this 10-year storyline of the disaster here, there's been so much change in our country and in Boston, from ending the First World War to sugar replacing molasses to the industrial alcohol distilling, the weapons, all the munitions, all the stuff they needed from molasses, to the war ending, and because of prohibition happening in a little over a year, going back to grain alcohol, to manufacturing molasses for rum, to the collapse of the molasses tank, to the trials, to the economic crap going on in America at the time. So it's not just the Boston, the Great Molasses, molasses, that's Boston molasses. The Great Molasses Boston. The Great Boston Molasses Flood is not just about that. It's about everything going on in this dang country. Then I want to tell you, we're almost done, so bear with me. They did at the end of this book, in the epilogue, they told what they knew happened to all these people that we talked about this story. And two, I find more interesting than anything. One is Martin Claggery. He's the one that was shoved out into the street, grabbed what he thought was a raft. It was his bed, saw a hand in the molasses, pulled it out, and it was his sister. His mother was killed. His brother, he finally had to check into a mental institution. He stayed at the Pen and Pencil Club until Prohibition went into effect. And then after that, no one knows anything about him. Actually, there's three I want to tell you about. That was one. Number two, Arthur P. Gell, the antagonist of the entire story. I was born in 1954. Anyone that was born after 1963, let me rephrase that. Anyone that was born before 1963, sorry about that, you were alive at the same time Arthur P. Gell was. Arthur P. Gell, Assistant Treasurer of the USIA, worked at the company's New York City headquarters throughout the hearing, and while Ogden was writing his verdict. Little is known of Gell. Records are inconclusive, but it indicated that he lived in New Jersey and later moved to Maryland and died in 1963 at the age of 85. So when the Beach Boys were doing their big hits and everything, Gell was still alive. When I was 9 years old, Gell was still alive. Do you think I ever heard about Gell? And this molasses flood in my history classes? No. That would be a big no. And it's a shame. Let me get the last one. I'm still here. The other amazing one is Antonio Devastation. A lot of you, listen to all my tapes, know this dude. He was Maria's brother. He suffered a fractured skull in the flood. He went on to be, he was the one that came out from hiding to be with his sister to help her. And while he did, poor little 10-year-old Pasquale stayed back and he was killed. Anyway, he became a boxer. He fought in about 200 bouts under the name Kanyo. He died at age 86 after caring for his wife. who was hospitalized with Alzheimer's. Not old-timers, Alzheimer's. A reporter from the Boston Globe came to interview him, check this year out, in 1990. And he said, I got 2 bedrooms here. I'm waiting for her to come home, but it looks bad. Every time I talk about it, I start crying. So we don't know when he died, but we do know it was after 1990. Now that puts a lot of people here when one of these survivors, the rest of them all kind of died earlier from whatever reasons. We just hit the 1 hour mark, but we are the same as done. So the case is closed. At the back of the book, the liability was given to the United States Industrial Alcohol. Back of the book, there's a list of the people that were killed. I know you can't read that, but it's just visual effect. And their ages. There's the very book. Make sure you understand that this guy just didn't take a bunch of not facts. Those would be non-facts. Those would be untrue facts. That he has a bibliography that tells you where he got all his information. And there's a lot of cool pictures in here, and they all come from the Boston Fire Department, the archives of it. So, if you've been interested in this and you've not bought another book, I'm not making any money off this. Here we go, Dark Tide, and you'll get the whole story. The truth. Just the facts, ma'am. I have a friend in northern Indiana who I have to say that to, and she says it to me. Just the facts, ma'am. I'm going to include this on my Facebook page. I'm going to include the name of the book and where you can order it. I'm going to include the recipes that we use throughout the week, which the best being my grandma's molasses cookies. I have a recipe for Boston brown bread, always made with molasses. For Boston molasses beans, baked beans. For, they weren't quite as good, but molasses bran muffins that stay 6 weeks in your refrigerator. And one more. Molasses cake that was wonderful, and it had an icing on it to die for. And not an icing, a sauce that thickened up like hot fudge sauce. You can put it on ice cream. There'll be a recipe for that. And if you've just seen this one, you missed the rest. Better go back and see what happened, especially number 4. Number 4 is the actual collapse of the tank. And it's not a commercial either. But doing all this, if I learn something every day, then my task has been fulfilled. This is a recipe book I just bought called like Time, T-H-Y, Made to Discover. And it's recipes all from actually a time period before this. And there's a lot of good recipes, and I found out a couple places I want to go, like the oldest existing tavern in the United States is in either Maryland or Delaware, I can't remember where. But it's called the White Horse Tavern, and I'm going to go there someday. And believe me, I'll go. I watched a little video once on Chicken Alaska, and I said before I die, I'm going to Chicken Alaska. I've been there. Bucket list, get them. Okay, then to end this, since we're already into whatever, the number one dance in the early 20s, many of you know this, I did it in school once, believe it or not, I learned how to do it. You know what it is? You're going to see, we're going to end with me and the rest of my cookie, and you thinking about all the stuff that we've talked about. And my next little series I do are going to be 1 minute or less. I know you can't believe that, but my videos are going to be 1 minute or less. Low battery, 10% remaining. That's fine. We're almost done here. So let me find this little song right here, and we'll leave with this little song. I don't know where this little song is, but I'm sure I can keep talking while we get it. I've got a new camera I'm working on, and probably next time I videotape it'll be with a new camera, which Anyone that follows me will be really, really glad. Here we go.
Hey, we don't use those pillows.
Sorry, I
right?
got 3 seconds
Not
of this
really.
commercial.
Awesome.
What you can do for me is have this song play. What you can do for me is that if you hear anyone that ever says something about the Molasses flood of 1919, you can say, hey, I know about that. You ought to hear about this. You guys just spread that word a little bit. Then I feel like history is really, really being taken care of, which is what we need to do. I'd like to listen to just a little bit of the Charleston #1 dance. Remember, once Prohibition started and speakeasies opened everywhere, you had to sell alcohol illegally. You can go if you want. I'm going to let this play for this moment. Hey, because I love it. I've got video of me doing the Charleston years ago. We taught all the kids in the 5th grade to do the Charleston. Might as well make this the longest one and just let you watch this for me. You can leave if you want to. I'll wave goodbye at the end. You slow the Charleston down in little steps. It's very, very easy to do. Reminds me of basketball drills when I used to break them down for the kids. You break those steps down for the Charleston and you will be doing is what these people are doing in no time at all. Hope you've liked this series.